Peer software is actually the main goal of peer software. I would say it in one sentence is keep your files as close or keep your data as close to your application and to your user as possible. That's actually what it is about. But the agenda today, what I want to talk about is in this presentation who we are, of course, where we come from, then our typical pains of the client which we face, clients which come to us and which typical pains they face, pain they have. Then the key benefits for our clients using our software, of course. And then, of course, a little bit about the product. And when I'm done with the PowerPoint, Pete will go on with a live demo of the software itself. So about Peer Software. Peer Software is a private founded company, founded in 1993. It's totally in private hands still, which gives certain advantage because there are short ways, short decisions, and there is no conflict of interest on the market. It's really a familiar company. It's stable. It's very long in the market, since almost 30 years, as you can see, with a lot of experience, of course. We have offices more or less around the world. It started all in the US, of course. Now we have offices on the East Coast and the West Coast. Especially I want to mention close in Virginia, close to Washington, because we are also having government and military organizations as a client, and we are really local there for these clients here. Then in Europe, EMEA, of course, in the biggest market there in the UK and the DACH region, we have offices here, and last but not least, and very new, in Dubai, the Middle East, because the Middle East is a very high growing market for us at the moment. So we want to be there local. We want to there with our clients and be part of the growing market there in the storage area. The solutions we have, and our main product is the global file services, PeerGFS, where we, which you can see later, where we put all our functionalities and solution more or less into one product. Then we have additionally PeerSync, where we offer migrations to clients. Clients which have huge amount of data and want to migrate from one place to another, from one storage to another. We offer them with PeerSync the migration solution. And first of all, before it all goes to the migration, we have a file system analyzing tool, which is free. Everybody can download it. But we built that because even our clients, they don't know which kind of data they have on their storages. They don't know all the directories. They don't know when was the last time users accessed those files. Do they need those files, and how difficult it's going to be to migrate them or synchronize them from one place to another. And that's why we have built this file system analyzing tool, which is free. Everybody can use it, and it gives you a complete overview which kind of files you have on your systems there. The key partners, which we're working closely together, is of course Microsoft, NetApp, Nutanix, Dell EMC as storage vendors, and AWS, of course. And they are not only technology partners, so we are able to work with them to do our file monitoring and synchronization directly on their storage devices or off their storage devices. They also use us as an argument to sell their products as well, and they co-sell our software with when the customer is asking for it. This is just an overview of the executive team. I have just put there some pictures and names on it. You can see here it all started with him, with Paul Masala. He wanted to solve a problem of file synchronization. That's all where it started almost 30 years ago. Now, all these people, I don't want to go in detail on each of single one, but all these people have long experience. They are long in the market already, and most of them are working very long already with Peer Software, which shows also it's a stable company. People stay, they don't change. There is not every 3-4 years a new CEO with a new philosophy and such things. It's all stable. It goes in one direction, and we all stick together there. So the next thing is the typical customer pain points, which I want to explain. So typically customers, they come to us when they have, first of all, multi-sites. Starts that. They have an infrastructure, they have many different, too many different locations there, and they want to, of course, have their data on one side and on the other side. So you need to replicate or synchronize the files. That's what they want. Then, of course, we have clients, they come to us and say, you know, we have one centralized IT infrastructure, and now we want, but the access to all the different locations, because all files are in one location, the access is really slow, it's not stable, we face a lot of problems, users are complaining, so what can we do about it to solve that problem? The next thing is, when customers are coming to us and say, we have data growth like crazy, we don't know what to do about it. You know, we have to buy storage, add more storage, add more storage. Is there a possibility with Peer Software we can do what we can do about it? That's another thing. Then, of course, customers also saying that there's a possibility that we have hybrid cloud environments. We have a part here, we have a part there. So they have multiple storage systems. They have on one side, they have storage systems, they are in the cloud. On the other side, they have local Windows file servers. There is a NetApp, there's a Dell EMC storage. So how can we solve that without complete rebuying or reinstalling our complete new IT infrastructure here, of course. And then there is also people which say we want to have a centralized management for this whole process there. And these are the typical pains actually we face right there. So the key benefits for our clients here is they want, of course, productivity. So they don't want that user complains that they have slow or no access to their data. They want that everything is going in a flow, that everything moves forward. Even with bigger files, imagine construction files, media data, huge video files and so on. They want to have it directly, quick access to it. That's the next thing. And then they want to have, of course, resilience, like we want to know that our files are always available for us. You know, the high availability, 24/7. Or if something happens, that we don't lose our files. That's also what they benefit by using PeerGFS. Then they want to be flexible, of course. They don't want to say now I'm using Dell EMC storages in this location, I'm using NetApp in this other location, and here I'm using classical Windows file servers or whatever. So I want to just connect them all together and not rebuy the whole infrastructure or storage structure completely new here. And of course it needs to be extendable. The customer want to have the flexibility to grow, to create new locations without redoing everything, to go to the cloud, of course, without losing the advantage of what I had local. And that's what they can benefit by using the PeerGFS solution. So the core capabilities of PeerGFS is cross-platform integration. I think this is one of the most important arguments for our software, because we can say to the client, you know, you can use your current storage infrastructure, we just lay on it, we integrate on it, and we connect and synchronize and replicate all your files to each location however you want. The next thing is real-time synchronization. So we make sure that your users on location 1 have the same version and the same files as your users on the location 2. And if you change something on location 1, we make sure that you immediately have it available on location 2. Even with bigger files, we have the delta replication, so we can even split and create separate chunks and only synchronize the chunks which has changed to the other side, so we don't need to resynchronize always the complete file. Integrated distributed file locking allows or avoids version conflicts, of course. So we know all when user 1 on location 1 is working on a file and user 2 on location 2 is working on the same file actually, they both press save and then you have a conflict of the file. What they do normally, each version of the file gets stored. You have a tremendous data growth in this case, because nobody deletes those files anymore. Okay, so we make sure that if a user on one side works on a file, that it gets locked on the other side, as long as user is working on, and when he's done, we make sure it's free for the other user and he can work on an updated version of the file as well. We have an integration in DFS namespace, and we actually manage Microsoft DFS namespace, and for a good reason. In this case here, we have decided not to use our own namespace technology to provide high availability to our clients. We have used the already long existing technology from Microsoft here, which we simply integrate. And Pete will show that in detail how it works exactly. But with DFS namespace from Microsoft, we create not only a high availability solution, when one side is going down, your users are automatically redirected to the other side because of DFS, without any interruption, without anything. But putting here in your system a load balancer, you can have actually an active side. You can put the one part of the users on your first location and the second part of the users on your second location. So it's not just an active passive when I switch over only only when it's for a failover solution. It can be an active side, so you use the performance of both your storage environments and not only the passive side in case of a disaster here. So that's how it works with DFS namespace. Then, when it comes to data growth, and this is a big pain of our clients actually, is we need to add more and more storage, because have you ever told your users, I don't know if you worked as an administrator, you said, have you ever told your users to clean up your drive? Huh? And you remember what happens then?
We're going to hang you, huh?
Nothing. I used to work in a data center, Norris Network, before, and we had a big project for a bank. So we had to migrate from the old IT environment to really a brand new IT environment. And they told the users before, clean up your drive. The file server is way too much. We will not provide this amount of storage anymore in the new environment. It was not even 5% of cleaning up. So this is what happens actually. So with the dynamic storage utilization, we can say you have one centralized storage, which holds all your data in real time and in real size. And on your edge locations, you just put the files which are most needed. So there are policies where you can say files which are regularly accessed, we put local on each site, on each edge location. Files which are since 3 weeks not accessed anymore, they will be only available on your centralized storage, but the user will still see them on the edge location, like they were there. And if in any case, magically he needs a file from last year ago, he has it, it just will get downloaded on the back end, and then he has it local available. If he doesn't use it anymore, policy comes in place, goes back to the central storage. So in this case, excuse me?
Christmas card picture.
Yeah, exactly, for example. So in this case, you can save a lot of storage at the edge places actually, and you don't have to have the same storage available on your edge locations like you would have to have in your central location there. And this is how dynamic storage utilization works. And then we have one, also I would call it a very, very important, this makes a difference for us, is the malicious event detection. So imagine we do real-time file synchronization. So we monitor the complete file and folder structure which you have on your file systems. No matter if it's on a Windows file server, NetApp storage or whatever, we monitor it. So when we monitor it actually, we know what happens with this file. So we have 3 functionalities there in place where we can recognize if there is, for example, a cryptolocker attack on your file systems. The first thing is that we look at the behavior. That means if, for example, a cryptolocker comes in, and normally what it does, it goes file by file in an order, file by folder, folder by folder, file by file, opens it. When we recognize that such things happen, which is not normal for a user, we can run some action. We can inform you, we can also, Pete will show this later in the software, we can also stop synchronization that your other locations are completely protected. But that's not all. What we have there as well, we have there a bad file, Opferdatei. We put there a hidden bad file. If this bad file is ever touched, renamed, opened, whatever, we know exactly there's something wrong. We do a warning or we run some action. And then we also decided we might keep this CryptoLogger a little bit busy and get you time that you react on something. So we have there an endless directory. How you call it in English correctly? A bad directory.
A redirect, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the CryptoLogger will go endless in a directory. Pete will show you that as well. It's endless, and this keeps the CryptoLogger process, first of all, busy, and you have time to do something about it.
Yeah, and we will elaborate onto that as well, because what we found is when we took a lot of these nasty things to try and understand the patterns and what's going on, we realized that a lot of them were single-threaded in that process because they wanted to stay undetected on the operating system, so they just spin up one thread and slowly go through the system. And what Richie said is as soon as it got stuck in a folder, it just looped back on itself, and we contained it for a while.
It's like a honeypot.
That's right, yeah. And I think the key here is Richie's rightly put. What we're trying to not do here is we're not talking about coming in, replacing antivirus and all of this type of thing. We're a real-time replication solution, and you can already see that if things are changing on one site and they're being replicated across the network, it's going to make the problem an awful lot worse. So this is a real competition sort of differentiator for Peer Software. Absolutely. Because we have an ability that can detect it, stop it, and stop spreading this from getting all over the place.
And you don't stop it.
No, we stop it to spread to the other locations, because normally it would get encrypted on one side and we would synchronize this encryption to the other locations. So there we stop.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very well observed.
Or something like that.
No.
But it's not replacing an anti-malware solution or something. It's just an additional layer in your whole security umbrella there, where you say, this gives you still some kind of protection against CryptoLogger, which isn't there normally. Mm-hmm. Okay, because you rely on your antivirus or you rely on your firewall or whatever, which tells you something is wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
So let me show you the three most used cases where PeerGFS comes into. And this is global file sharing and collaboration. So customer, they come to us and say, I have multiple locations here, and I have files there, and I have files there, and we have versions conflict. So we start, of course, we can synchronize your files in between your locations. Okay, the client says, very good, then I have always the files here, and in this place, it's a high availability solution. But what about then versioning? Okay, we say, we do file locking, so we avoid version conflicts with PeerGFS. Then the client says, what about backing up? So we will be able even to back up from one location all the files into the cloud. I will explain this a little bit later then. And then of course. Then a client comes and says, I have two locations, I want to synchronize, or I want to move from one location to another location, even with the virtual desktop, with the VDI infrastructure. I want to have all the profiles on both sides available. Data center synchronization with PeerGFS, no problem. Mm-hmm. And then, as I said, cloud backup replication, you must imagine. Pete will show that. We have a location in London, we have a location in New York, but you need to back up it only from one place because we synchronize all the files in between both places. And then you put the backup functionality from PeerGFS in place, which puts it into a cheap one, cost-effective, not expensive. Sorry, cost-effective storage like an object store, of course. You can use any kind of object store which is around, typically blob storage of Microsoft or AWS S3, or your local blob storage in a different location. Whatever it can be a NetApp storage grid, whatever is available there, you have. What is important here to say is that it's an open source. You don't need PeerGFS later to access the files if you don't want to. Those files are always available for you. Yeah.
Excuse me, did you say block or blob?
The blob storage is the Microsoft Azure blob storage, but in general it's a block storage. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Object store. Sorry. Object store. Sorry, my mistake. Object store.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, my mistake.
Okay.
Cost-effective object store. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Yes. All right. How it works? So I explained already. You can have so many different storage systems available in different locations that will all work and integrate with PeerGFS. It can be Windows, it can be NetApp, it can be Dell EMC and Nutanix. For those, we have an integration. We work closely together with them. But otherwise, it's always Windows local disks, no matter what it is. iSCSI, Fiber Channel will work with any Windows server. And then, of course, you have in place your backup object store. That's not block store, object store. And all what you need is in one place you have a central management location where you manage all the synchronization, replication, backup from one place. And then you install the agent in each location for each storage device there, and it gets a real-time synchronization to your central data store, let's say, in this case.
Do you keep metadata somewhere?
We also synchronize the metadata. That's always synchronized, absolutely.
Okay. Metadata seems to be some sort of add-on or sideshow.
It depends then on the file and the application itself. Pete will show you that we have certain support for that. We support already all kind of Adobe, all kind of CAD files, add-ons and such things. This will be all synchronized there. And also locked when it's about file version.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, so in each location an agent, it's all in real-time synchronization, replication, and the cloud backup. And the cloud backup itself can be snapshot based. So you say 2 times a day, 5 times a day, I want to just have one point in time there, do my backup. Or you can have it as a continuous data protection, so each change of each file will automatically go into the backup object store there. And then of course in the cloud you can do more things with it. This is not what we do here, but you can run whatever you want on your object store to analyze your files or do something else with it. Pete also will talk about that maybe a little bit later on. All right, then we have the versioning to avoid versions conflict. So we lock files on each locations if somebody is working on. And then we have the next thing, the global DFS namespace. And the global DFS namespace, we are integrated, we manage it, allows you the high availability solution of the whole thing. And think about it actually, when one location goes down, we redirect automatically using Microsoft DFS namespace to the other location. People will not recognize that something happened. Of course, there might be slower access to it, but it's still available. There's no question about it. The good thing is, which does the presentation show right now is, but I go back, before this happens again. So let's say we have this situation here. One location in storage is down, disk broken, whatever it is, and your users here get redirected to the other location. But before this comes back up and running, or before we change the redirection back here, we run again a synchronization and make sure there is no versions conflicts in between them. Because imagine if it's just a line or something and people were still working on this storage, then they would have a different version. We wouldn't know because there is no connection anymore. So before this all comes to work again, we do a synchronization, we make sure there's no version conflicts and people can work on it again.
Okay, makes sense.
And this is the point where
Yep, I'll jump in. Yeah.
I hand over to
This diagram here is important because this is what I'm about to show you in the demonstration. Why it's important is because for the demonstration, what we're going to jump onto is that central component, which is called the Peer Management Center. That's our console where an admin can completely control the estate that is being watched by Peer Software.
Does it have a dashboard?
Yeah, which I'll show you in just a moment. The Windows server here has a local agent installed. And why I mention that is because for us to get, I've obviously spoken a little bit about real time, so's Richie. Real time really is at the core of what Peer Software does. It's what gives us ability for the high availability component, continuous data protection component. And to achieve that, our agent needs to be local on the Windows machine, and it latches in through API access there and gets all the events that it needs. And I'll show you this in a bit more detail. That changes a little bit when we start to talk to NAS systems. So that's why I just wanted to elaborate onto this. Because when we start to talk to a NetApp system or a Dell EMC system or a Nutanix file system, we can install ourselves onto Untappy, right? Because it's running that Linux-based system that has. The same with obviously Dell EMC, what that has underneath, like OneFS, etc. So Peer has to go onto a Windows VM that sits just off the front of the NAS system, and then through some means it can handshake and start to get the information it needs from those systems when data starts to change, okay? And if we go through these different storage systems, if we're talking about NetApp, the connection for our agent to speak to the NetApp is all done through fPolicy, registers through the management API, through a management lift, and suddenly we've got, hey presto, all these fPolicy events coming to us. So that's, you know, Richie's just updated a file, deleted a file, modified, all of this good stuff. On the EMC side of things, now we're talking about the CE framework at the moment, the Common Event Enabler framework. So again, we're going to have to talk to the system, we handshake with it, and then come all these events through that system. And then Nutanix files is quite a rare one, because with Nutanix files, we do the audit change tracking API, and that's something also that we designed in conjunction with them. So when Nutanix were obviously doing their HCI piece, as you guys already know, they came along and started to talk about files. How can we present NAS capability on a Nutanix system? And when they did that, they obviously created that, and then they were like, well, how are we going to get data replicated off this? And this is in the early stages. Don't forget now they got Smart DR and all these great things. But early on, they needed a way that someone could provide high availability on Nutanix files clusters. And that's where they approached Peer, and working with them, we sit on the HCI cluster into the Nutanix files part of that, and it's literally just using that capability designed with them to make our software work optimally.
Can you tell me where the NFS protocol comes in?
The NFS side of things is not quite there yet for us.
Oh dear.
So at the moment it's SMB based, but what we're just about to do, I'm not wrong in saying this, the Linux side of things is about to be opened up in the next versions of the software. So what this means is
that top secret?
It's TS. It's T-stress TS. What we can say is
got permission.
we got the thumbs up yesterday. What we can say is at the moment, obviously I'm talking about VMs, Windows systems. The PMC is now also can be Linux based, which is great because that cuts down on license costings for people.
What's the name?
The PMC, the Peer Management Center,
Is what based?
is Linux based.
Oh.
And then on the VM side, that will also very soon be Linux based. Our branch out into Linux will be, or NFS, into the NFS protocol, will be there first. Okay, it will be with NetApp. Yeah. And then hopefully, well, we're not saying too much here, the momentum will then be to start to open that up to different NAS systems. But it's a really good question because we've been very SMB focused for a lot of our history, right? Richie had a very good point early on about how we were formed as a company, and that was just by a person having a problem trying to move a normal file, SMB file, from A to B. And so therefore he made this great tool that did that, and all of a sudden what you've got now is the capability that I'm about to show you, that it's been built on. And then our attention from Windows then focused onto NetApp, and then our attention then focused onto EMC. And when we talk about EMC, and you'll see this in a moment, the EMC capability side is also for Isilon, it's also for Dell EMC Unity, It's also for the old VNX systems. And don't forget, now we're going into, you're probably saying, what are you talking about? We're now going into like the Power Scale and Power Store product spaces.
Yeah, well,
So
nice.
exactly, so all of this now gets opened up for us.
The hot
with it.
stuff now.
Yeah, and exactly bang on. So, and even, is it Power Max? There's that one too that sneaks in. So all of the first two there, Power Store, Power Scale, all of these things will start to be incorporated into the product as we move forwards. Okay.
Sounds great.
So let me grab the.
You want the mouse too or not?
No, I shouldn't need it. If I
So
just
what's the time frame for this Dell Power integration or support?
So with one of them, obviously the superseder, or the successor to to the Isilon side of things,
Yeah.
that's pretty much there now. So we can deal with that already.
Yeah.
The other two we've got to start to look into in a bit more detail. So this is our PMC. This is the Peer Management Center. So this is the central component in that framework that we've got. As Richie already said, the Peer Management Center really is the backbone of our Peer Global File Service.
Can I have an image of this?
Yeah, of course.
You will get a presentation. You will get
No,
everything.
this is not good. Yeah.
Oh, right.
But I can yeah.
This is,
We can do a picture right after the screenshot and send it directly to you.
The key is like what does the administrator get with the solution when they first log into it? So this is put onto a central location, and then what they can then begin to do is bring their storage systems into the remit of what we manage. Okay, so if I just go around the screen and then elaborate more onto it, the top left part detects the types of jobs that we're going to be talking about. So what are we going to be doing with Peer Software in the real world? So these will be the use cases in a moment that I'll speak about. This is where we're actually going to be replicating and doing all the good stuff with the data down in the bottom left corner. And then the admin obviously comes in and gets the pane of glass. You can see that everything's green, everything's running. We all know some GUIs, they're always green. But Peer really does provide you back information when things break. Okay.
generally boring.
Yeah.
All green.
So at the moment you can see there's differences in file replication, collaboration, you name it, it tells you alerts, hey presto. Being central as well means that we can fire stuff out if it goes wrong. So if something is to fail or something is to go offline or our jobs don't work, then we can get that over to people through SNMP. We can fire off traps to people. And also there's an API backend too that people can query the system if they want to, which is quite nice. So let me start sort of in the top left corner and just work through the story of what the demonstration lab has available and within it. And first of all, Richie's already spoken to this, so it's really to add colour now to what Richie's already said earlier on in the presentation. And the first part here is about collaboration. Collaboration, why it's important for us is because you guys obviously understand that if I have one file server with standard-based Windows applications, Microsoft applications like Word or Excel, when people open them, so if Richie opens a document called Projects 1, when I come and open that same document, I'm not allowed to because the application stops me. We're all familiar with it, right? Because we're all working on the same server and we all understand that. When we start to bring that capability apart and we have then two locations and we replicate the data, what's going to do that locking now? It's okay if we're on the same server, that's going to work optimally, but suddenly it won't work across a distributed environment. Imagine now if you start to mix your storage systems, it gets even more complicated because now you've got a Windows system and you've got a Nutanix file system and now you've got a NAS system from EMC. And how's the lock-in supposed to work against all of these systems?
Interesting times.
And that's where Peer comes in, because Peer, for its event detection, will be able to suddenly see that Richie's opened the file on the Windows site and lock it on my NAS system here. And I'll go into more detail about that. Where this is it's got some traction at the moment is we've currently just released a case study with SSI in the US that makes ships. And they had the situation where they were like ship architectural company, they use a very similar software to AutoCAD, I believe. They needed the distributed locking across multiple locations. And so all of a sudden, they had to look for a solution that could enable their users local access, because imagine how big these drawings are. They don't want to be pulling down from a central location. They don't want to have to be going across the pond and pulling them back. So they suddenly looked for a solution that provided distributed locking and real-time replication. And there's a case study which we'll send round afterwards that will show you that we've just gone into sort of a partnership with them about trying to get momentum with more shipbuilders, but using this type of AutoCAD software. We already support those types of applications that Richie just mentioned earlier: AutoCAD, AutoCAD Civil 3D, Revit in non-work sharing and work sharing mode. All of this becomes possible for people to collaborate across multiple locations because Peer software will provide distributed locking between all of these instances. What usually comes back at this point in the conversation is someone will go, well, we've got SharePoint, or we've got Office 365, so where's really your relevance? And what we've got to say about that is those solutions are good, right? And we've actually got partners that actually use our software as well. And so what we say back is those solutions are very good, but Peer will enable you to keep that NAS system. It will enable you to keep your current infrastructure. It will also not challenge your data integrity rights. And what do I mean by that? By having that data put in someone else's control. You keep control of it on your local premises.
Have you ever taught SharePoint to your users? I did it once.
Exactly.
And it's also a cost question. Having SharePoint available on all your locations is a lot more cost than PeerGFS. And PeerGFS allows the users to do their work like they always did, with the file locking, with the synchronization.
Yeah, you've got it. So the project data job that we've got here, we're providing real-time replication and we're providing distributed file locking. Okay, so that capability, exactly like Rich said. And on this particular job, what we're really talking about is two locations. One's in New York, one's in Paris, and these people are working on the same data, safe in the knowledge that they're not going to overwrite each other's files. Okay, so really important. But at the moment for this particular job, all the data is there. So if someone's got a project that's 4 terabytes in New York, those 4 terabytes need to be in Paris, and that's how this particular job works. But what we can do, and Rich already alluded to this in one of our features, is we can also do some clever stuff with how that data appears to the users and how we configure ourselves for usage with that data. What do I mean by that, with that tongue-tied sentence? Well, we can make sure that if there was a problem where, and this job here has got it, if London had it couldn't facilitate lots of storage, let's say like that, through cost or for whatever reason, and the server here was only 500 gigabytes, yet the project was 4 terabytes in size. Peer software, through its DSU, Dynamic Storage Utilization feature, would be able to ensure that just the usable data is kept on that edge location for those users. So that data, and we all know the stats, I'll probably get the stat wrong because it seems to change like every week, but is it like 80% of data after it's created and used for the first time is then put in the garage and never touched again? And we've had lots of good questions around this topic because people have spoken about, obviously data sprawl now comes into the equation. Like this stuff just grows and grows, and so Peer's way to try and help our customers and to reduce their costing on these edge locations where they have Windows servers, we can be a bit more intelligent with what data gets kept there and stored there. And we can do that through a few methods, a few ways. So if I just quickly go into like the job configuration and choose that London edge location, if I just skip through, the dynamic storage policy is enabled on those jobs, which immediately means it's going to be configurable to the admin. And then the admin can then come in and determine what policies to set at both a volume level and a utilization level. And you can see at the volume level here for this particular scenario, it's coming through, good. I can say, right, just use 50% of this or up to this amount. I can then send it I can tell it to sort of send alerts when a certain threshold gets met. So the admin gets a sense of control as well, so he can see what's going on that storage system. And it goes back in check with the file system analyzer that we've got. We've learned over the years that this is an area where people just don't really know. They don't really know the data they've got. There's sometimes it's sprawling out of control, and Peer can come in and at least aid and assist in the process to just reduce that footprint on that location. They're still going to have to clean it out one day, right? They're still going to have to go into the garage and work out what they need and what they don't need. But Peer...
Do you serve a kind of classification service? I mean,
not yet. Yeah, not yet.
Never heard of?
No.
I mean, might come in useful to help your users. These are your most important customer data on this machine, and here is all the rubbish.
So we won't say too much, but at the end we'll talk about there's some pillars of where Peer will strive towards.
How many pillars?
There's a few pillars of where we want to go to with the product moving forwards. Obviously we'll be a bit careful what we say, but there are things now, because you've already seen, if we've got all of this data everywhere, user data, project data, we're seeing an awful lot of data here, right? We're seeing and understanding a lot about what's going on with data, etc. So there will be more to come on this, as we move forward with our story with Peer Software about analytics and what's to come.
How old is this company?
It's near just shy of 30 years, 1993 it was founded.
1993.
Yeah. And I think that's a key point that Richie made. It's still going, it's still stable, it's still profitable, and these are key markers for us, moving forwards. And that's a benefit for us to be here today, because we've been in Munich, for also quite a long time. I know I'm speaking English and I'm English, but I live in Tufkirchen up the road, so I work and live in
there was
Munich
just
too.
an unobtrusive hint. There could be more functionality to this software.
It was an ironic question.
I missed it. I missed the irony. Damn it.
Gotcha.
I know, God. So the volume side of things allows the admin to configure that side up. And then there's also how they can create email alerts against that. And then moving forwards, if I apply that, he really did get me. There's also a way here that we can set things at a utilization policy level. And what that really means from a utilization perspective is we're now not talking about, let me get the right one, we're now not talking about the volume level, it's what we want to do with the actual file data. So you'll notice there's a word that will come on the screen now called stubbing. That's exactly what we're doing. So when the users access that data, it's going to look like normal data.
What's a stub file?
This is what you're going to see now. So I'm a user now and I log into my London server. Remember, the London server is the server that's not got so much space. It's a Windows server. And the user comes in and they see the data from a user perspective just like normal.
A lot of rubbish.
There is a lot of rubbish in there, so it's just like normal. And then if we click on one of those files where the policy has run, you guys will notice all of a sudden now that the size on disk is now 0. So the file looks like it's there, the structure's identical, but now what would happen is the user would click on that file, it would call back to the master, retrieve that, and then we'd be able to open it and access it.
Looking for content, and
there it goes, and it will pull down.
nothing in there.
It probably won't be. There you go. Space exploration technologies there. So it probably takes a little bit longer just to put it down because I had to go and get it from somewhere, but the user now can continue to work and we've not impacted that source system. So users still go local. They're still accessing their files regularly because those files are, like I said with that statistic, most of the files they need are going to be there day after day after day. And then all of a sudden they need to go into that project. They need to look in the cupboard under the stairs and what's in there. And suddenly now, that's it. And they find that file and then, hey presto, it'll pull it back down from the master. So I think from a DSU perspective, it's a very, very powerful feature for us. It gives us a bit more control in terms of pricing, because the previous job, the way you'd have to handle this previously would be that you would be in a situation where you're just having to add more storage to the edge location, which can sometimes be quite delicate, depending on what it is, where it is. And you're already seeing, there's this concept here between edge and data center that we'll speak more about as the demo progresses.
Now, every other client I speak to at the moment is just coming to us because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if we
Running
want
out
to...
of space.
Running out of space, adding storage. I used to work in the data center, and you know how many calls, I was responsible for storage and backup operations there.
Oh.
You know how many calls you get every week, increase my storage. It's always the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if we wanted to, we could also pin certain folders. So imagine if we knew next week a project was coming along that was for this particular shipbuilder or for this particular metro system that people were going to design, then they could pin that project, and it would obviously bring it all down to that edge location ready for the users, so that Monday morning when they come in to start working,
the system breaks down.
That's right. Yeah, either breaks down or they set it, because some customers we had before, even with the old job types where all the data used to be local, when they'd find Peer, they would say sometimes they'd come in the morning, they would set Revit off, they would be pulling down, the local, like the reference models would all be come down local. They'd go off, get themselves a cup of tea, they'd come back 10-15 minutes later, and then they could finally work on that content because finally they'd pulled it down to their local instance. And that's one of the key benefits here of Peer software. It eradicates that sort of side of things because Peer's data is always local for our users. And in a moment, obviously, we'll talk about the cloud and how that affects things as well. So from a DSU's perspective, obviously quite easy to get our heads around what it's trying to accomplish, plus the collaboration piece. And then Richie also mentioned about DFSN. Richie's spot on with what he said, that we didn't want to, as an organization, we didn't want to come along and suddenly create our own namespace to trap customers in or have customers migrate into our namespace, just for control of what happens when things fail over. Microsoft DFSN is very well known in the industry. It's very well used, at least for the customers and clients that we see with SMB Microsoft environments, and it fulfills a role very well. And what that role is here is, think of it from a sort of user perspective. I don't care if my data's in London or New York, I'll hit the namespace, and the namespace, through shortest path, site awareness, gets me to my local location. And that capability is already there in Microsoft DFSN. We suck that in here, and we marry that up to a job in our collaboration space. Why that's important is in terms of failover. Okay, and what I mean by this is, suddenly you have two locations. Remember, we had London and New York. Let's take that as an example. Now, if London goes down, the namespace will realize and it will point the users to the target location. So we've obviously stopped replicating because one of our servers is now offline. But what happens when that London server comes back up? The last thing you would want is for that server to come back up and suddenly the namespace go, hey, it's back. Flip the users now back to the source, and all of their data is out of date, and now suddenly they start working on
wrong version.
Exactly. It would be a big, complete mess. So through the control of the namespace element, Peer is able to keep those users at the target. And what it does is it keeps them there because the primary now comes back online, or that London location that's been offline, and it will then bring that back up to speed. It will bring it back up to date with the data, and only at the point when that data is then back up to the same, I suppose, modification standard as the target was, it will then make it active and the users can then bounce back and start to work. Because otherwise you get yourself in a right big old mess. And don't forget, the way we're talking here is we're not talking at the moment about replication. We're really talking about file synchronization. And synchronization is also a different beast to replication. And we'll talk about replication in a moment, but synchronization is talking about active, okay? What normally comes as well when I say active is someone says, oh, do you do synchronous write and all of these types of questions? Well, Peer, obviously, as you've already heard from the explanations, it's going to write to the local source system, and then when that data is committed on the source system, then it will move it to the target system. So synchronous systems are great, but they're also great for the wallet of companies. They also cost a lot of money, because, you know, synchronous writes mean that NetApp systems or whoever have to write here and write here, and then the file gets released. And you have to have the right bandwidth in place for that. You need the right capability, and also the data is really active passive in these types of replication clustered technologies, which means that if anything ever happens to the source system, you'll have to break that relationship, and then the target becomes active. With Peer, even in a synchronization mode, which is what I'll show you in a moment, it always stays active. That means users could access the source systems and the target systems simultaneously, which again is quite a differentiator. So that's around the namespace side and how things are integrating. If we talk about synchronization here, we're now talking about user data. So forget now the bit about project-related data that I've just spoken about, where everyone's working on the same files. Now we're talking about users. And a great example of this is, you can see it says Citrix profile data. This now is regarding things like, if you had Citrix UPM, for example, there'll be a content of user data in there, right? There'll be that user data that is in my documents, that's on my desktop, wherever. And what Peer can accomplish, particularly if we take Citrix UPM as an example, we can replicate that data in real time for high availability. So what that means is, if I'm coming in to say, let's say again, the London server where my profile is, and up spins all my applications and my profile's there, and off I go working through Citrix, and then that site fails, I'm safe in the knowledge that when the system, through a load balancing or whatever it is they're using, when it points me to the target side, my profile data and my applications will be made available not only by the applications that have been switched, but also by Peer Software working in the background to keep that data up to date. So for VDI, there's also a very strong use case for that. And we won't see a lot, but I've got something in the background, you know, that's at least pouring in the data as we speak. It's keeping the data up to date.
Don't you have any graphics?
It's trying to behave. There is a summary side.
This screen is so
That was
boring.
again ironic because of the dashboard.
I know. There's the summary side of things, and you're spot on with what you're saying, right? You really are, and this has been some feedback from day one, and this is why now one of the core capabilities that we're trying to build into the product is really trying to get more visibility of what's going on, and that's what's coming. So not only do you get like the summary side of things with what's being shifted around, you'll also start to get all of those nice graphs, etc. Under the hood, you know, Richie mentioned there was an FSA part, a file system analyzer part. The tool also works every week, and it just goes through the data and just understands what's in there, and it creates tables and it creates graphs, and people can say, oh look, there's my data, this is what's changed last week, and so they can access that data if they need to. There is a lot more to come into the GUI itself.
Yeah. After 30 years.
Yeah. I think also you start to get the you can see that it's a very technically focused company, and I think you can see that it's evident. But one of those pillars I was talking about moving forwards really is to start doing more with the data as we move forward.
You haven't even showed the scripts that are probably behind all of these.
So in terms of scripting, it's more the local agents talking to the local NAS systems through API access. So we're given all the information we need, and then the hub's going off and looking at what it needs, etc. And then there is file replication pieces. So this is talking about unidirectional replication between source systems to target systems. And why this one is quite interesting to show is that this is where we see the different storage platforms that are replicating to a central location. So exactly what Richie said earlier on that note, that you can have multiple NAS systems all going into a central location that then gets that data somewhere where it can be managed, analytics run against it, and also Peer, with that top use case here, can then back that data up into the cloud. From the cloud perspective, it works on the synchronized or collaborative data. So we'd look at the data that we're already replicating around, and then we would push that up into AWS S3 into a bucket. We would push that into Azure Object Store. why this is quite nice and how we do it is, Richie said this too, you know, we're unproprietary. So what I mean by that is we push that into something that then can be used in the cloud. So why this is important, you know, going back to that DSU scenario, what people normally try and do if they want to reduce storage is they'll come along with an archiver, or they'll come along with something that scoops all the data up and locks it away and puts it into some target system. And what that normally means is that you won't be able to run any process against it, external. You won't be able to see what that data is. And how can you get your money's worth out of that data, right? Because isn't data the new oil, or was it a couple of years ago? Whereas with Peer, we're putting it into either an SMB endpoint with the master server, or we push it up into the cloud, where then you could run analytics against it, you could run cognitive services, machine learning, you could create a data lake based on your backed up data that's not a vault. And off you go. And some of the use cases, because I think use cases are always the interesting part, we've done proof of concepts where our real-time element has helped with that feeding the cloud part. So what I mean by that is, imagine if you have a law enforcement officer walking around on Munich and he's got a camera and he's capturing data, you know, people's faces in real time. Well, that data will go, no doubt, onto a server somewhere. That could be a Windows server, where our agent is, and it just sends it right into the cloud, and you've got unlimited capability in how you run and process against that data for things like facial recognition or name recognition, depending on what's going on. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, we're Munich, yeah. So there's these types of very valid use cases that are being also aided with our real-time replication piece and into the object or to the blob world. And we'll hopefully open this side up as well as we move forwards. At the moment we use it as obviously a backup side of things. So you've got the capability now that even if you get hit by ransomware, if you were doing this side of things here in terms of backing up through the product, you can then come into our GUI and you can do the restoration process here. Because we're using the cloud as well, you know, the objects are immutable, which means, you know, they should be there for an awfully long time. And if we want to retrieve them back, that can be easily. We can set retention policies. I'm not going to mention GDPR, but, you know. Stay alone. Yeah.
Okay. So the menu option update status would be a restore function?
It would come along and it would really request an update from the volume status that we're looking at. So it would make sure that everything's in check. We've also got the ability, so you can see there it's just edited a little bit. We've got ways that we can set process retention. We could also do recovery, and I think the recovery is the bit. The recovery was the bit I wanted to really show you, because I can go through the wizard, I can determine a point in time, I could retrieve back a file at a certain time. So I get granularity, and obviously looking at the GUI, you can see the engineers have thought this through. You can pick whatever you want and whatever you need to restore with the product. So point in time
would be RPO, right?
You could come back to a certain point in time, because we're also taking snapshots with the solution. Yeah. So how much, exactly right, how much data are you willing to lose based on the snapshot frequency that you set? And we could choose one here, and then we can even then go into that. We could restore the whole drive, or we could come down, we could select the actual, you know, data side, and hey presto, we could then restore that file to where you need it. So you get full rounded capability here. You get the side of the DFS management, the file collaboration side, synchronization side, and then you get this backup piece as well that can be integrated quite nicely. Richie obviously spoke a little about MED, and we spoke about that earlier, and that's probably a good thing to finish on. MED, which is our malicious event detection that we spoke about, and Rich did a great job to explain that. In the GUI itself, the capability is all here and laid out, you know, for our customers to see, and, you know, to select the appropriate action that they need based on things happening. So what we had was a couple of years ago, when this module was put into the framework, we had situations where a lot of our competition they were relying on other vendors to spot when their data was getting infected. And like I said earlier, when that data started to get infected, they would replicate it. They would replicate it. Because obviously
including the infection?
Yeah, our competition would. So DFSR, as a Microsoft free tool, when it sees data changing on the source side, across it goes. Okay?
Yeah, of course, with Microsoft DFSR replication, it replicates all changes from, if they get attacked on one side, it replicates the encrypted files on the other side, deletes the original ones. So.
I think that's counterproductive.
Yeah.
It's block replication, right?
Yeah, it's...
That's it, you've got it, yeah.
That's the problem. That's why we came with this MED in, because we monitor the files, why we should not recognize there is something wrong and we better stop it now before everything gets destroyed.
That's right. Yeah, because as soon as you detect, and you were rightly so, there's no prevention and we don't stop. You absolutely
correct. What I should have mentioned also, when you look at all the vendors out there, especially the storage vendors, they make snapshot, they have snap mirror, but they're all focusing on recovery your files. If you get a CryptoLocker, they don't have a functionality which avoids the encryption. They're just focusing on have your data safe and recover in case. Mm-hmm. But we try here already build the protection up front to say you don't even need to recover your files because we blocked the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And so what we've done in our last press release with A3 earlier in the year, we announced that we were teaming up with an American InfoSec company called Pulsar Security. And we can send this to you. So they're not a massive security company, but they are a group, and I don't think many people will, to be honest. They're based just. Yeah, that's what I should have said. They're based just north of Boston. But the reason why I bring them up is because they are now the company behind a lot of the pattern matching that we're sort of starting to drip into the product. So as far as security, and I'm from a sort of a security background, I don't really want to say too much about it, but as far as so as far as I'm aware, that group of people are exceptionally talented in the InfoSec world, and we've partnered with them, and they can start to take these things down. They can do all the dangerous stuff and see how they work, and then they can give us the binaries of what it looks like in terms of what's it doing at an operating system level. Richie was right. Lots of them, they will open a file, change a small percentage of a file, close the file, etc. And if that's happening on a sequence, we can begin to see that, and we can see the pattern, and we can match it. And as soon as we see that pattern, we'll stop things. Now, I can't say the customers, but there's two. One's Danish, and one's actually in Kuwait, where even though they had other items running on their systems to try and spot this stuff, Peer was the item that alerted them to something going on in their environment. Okay. Not saying anything. So what we were able to do, and I know we're going on a lot about this, but I think it's a real good differentiating point. For those two companies, it was priceless what we did. We were able to not only detect this happening, we woke them up in the morning so they could jump on and see it happening. They were then able to stop it, and then there's another feature in Peer called a trash bin, we call it, which means that any changed or deleted content on a source system gets put into a folder on the target system. It's very straightforward, it's very easy. Exactly. So every time this was encrypted and changed versions, let's call it, on the source, the previous file was just put into a folder which is hidden on the target. Only our service account can write into that folder, right? Which immediately meant, so they went down, one of these companies went down into the boardroom and said, we've just been hit. Everyone's like shock horror. How long is it going to take to recover? Well, everything's on tape. Oh, we have to get the tapes and back them up. We're looking at about 3 days. And someone put their hand up in the corner and went, no, I've got most of that changed data in a folder, SMB folder on the target. I'll just drop it back into the data set and it will replicate back and overwrite everything. So it was great in that situation. I won't talk any more about it because I think we've done it quite well here today. But as Peer moves forwards, it will start to do more on this topic. And there's these free ways at the moment, there's a whole lot of capability here to be unearthed. Within Peer as well, so just jumping away from the MED side, I could even maybe show you. Can I show you?
Do you have some API on this system so I can include it in my orchestration automation environment?
We interface with APIs. We interface with some of the local APIs through netfile enums on Windows systems, and then through the NetApp systems, obviously that's API driven as well to see open files, etc. Okay. The APIs as well. I was just coming in.
Okay. Yeah. I'm thinking about Ansible, stuff like this.
And the API that we have is with the Swagger side of things, just so that you can communicate and get stats back out of our system at the moment. But you're not the first person to ask.
Yeah, and it's really gain momentum more and more.
Yeah, and I think the ecosystem moves that way, doesn't it? About making things tie in with different products, etc. And Peer won't be any stranger to that moving forwards. In the installation directory here, you can see there's the MED folder, there's the PC trash bin. If I head into that MED file and just quickly, modify it, just type anything and save it, that will then send an alert through the PMC, and you can just
if you already open it, it will throw an alert.
Yeah, there you go. So I could have told the system obviously how to alert, what to do, take the job offline, all of these things. But you're starting to see, very rounded technology from Peer Software and what it can accomplish in the data world. We've not really spoken too much, right, about the hybrid workplace, what's sort of developing as we move forwards. And you guys, you've got your ears to the ground all the time in these types of spaces. But we're seeing a few trends. We saw in the pandemic this whole word of data transformation, and I don't want to drop all the buzzwords. I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to do that. But you saw people have to get themselves into the cloud to sort of start to get themselves off-prem where people were working, move into the cloud. And that was great. I mean, they did that and it fulfilled a purpose. But a lot of companies did that with everything. They literally said, right, I want an operational model. I want to be paying this much, and there goes my data. The problem is suddenly you had applications that were quite reliant on that data being local, very reliant, let's say it that way. Secondly, as you said earlier on, cost. This data, I can't control what Richie does with his unstructured data, right? It's called unstructured for a reason. I can try and clear stuff up, but it will just swell and it will grow. And so what you're starting to get this situation where suddenly bills are coming in that are an awful lot more than were anticipated for cloud. But I still think cloud has a space in the world. Definitely, and I think the hybrid world, which it's mapping into, is going to get the best of both worlds. And we've already seen some customers that are already coming to Peer to now do the opposite, to come back out. So can you help us now?
I forgot to mention that
Peter
Gard said that up to 40% of all the data available will be back located on the edge rather than the cloud in 2025.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And we see that. I mean, you have to prepare for disconnected services which we didn't think before about. I mean, it was funny because I know a guy last week where they got, I don't know if you heard about the pressure in the museum in Manching in Ingolstadt. Oh yeah. They cut the fiber glass line to switch off the alarm system, and the whole area had no internet anymore. And that's funny. And
there was an insider.
My brother works in Erlangen with Adidas, and they found an unsecured shaft where all the data cable from Adidas went through. So you could easily go in and clack, and switch off completely Adidas. Yeah. Unbelievable. And then you're happy you have your data, at least some of your data local, and you're productive again. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's key because the going back to the initial point, the cloud being one size fits all, it definitely is not, and we've definitely seen that firsthand with what people want to do with their data when they're talking to us, how they want to use cloud services, and how they still want to maintain some degree of on-prem infrastructure. And I said it already, but that's some of the main conversations that we have. And through the cloud play, obviously we state that we're hybrid, and when we talk about hybrid, we're pushing that data into object and blob, as you guys have seen. There's also ways that we can use usable footprints in the cloud. So what do I mean by that is, you could spin up a server in EC2, you could spin up a VM in Azure, you could attach some storage, and hey presto, you've got some resilience there for users to use if local servers go down. And I think that's another key area that we'll see a bit of traction. But the key here is what will the cloud really be used for in terms of the application or workloads. We do see things coming back. Now, don't get me wrong, people like Citrix, AutoCAD particularly, they'll try and get you into their own cloud play, right? Because that's the way they want you to go, and it's all going SaaS. We all know this. But there will still be some restrictions in that process. I think that's just got me right at the end now. I think my voice has just gone. But before we finish up, guys, is there any questions more around the product, what Richie said, or what peer software can do for our customers and the pain points?
So for me especially, it will be interesting once it goes the Linux path. I'm coming from a data center world and also Linux and Unix world, and so this is fine, and of course it's important, but my interest in
we realize that there are still many SMB-based file services,
for sure.
But it's no question about to go into the Linux world and into the NFS world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we have the permission to say it comes one time next year. Yeah?
Okay.
We got the permission from the CEO in person yesterday. So.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, but I can definitely see that world, especially from a real-time element. What can really achieve real-time, file-based replication and permission-based replication of NFS systems. So it will open up a few doors for Peer Software. And then to bring the banner collectively, because it's the first thing that gets said. It's like, oh, you're just SMB focused. Well, at least now we can say we're not moving forwards. We will be both protocol being supported.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot to it. Sorry, guys.
Can I just ask, so you guys had not spoken to Peer Software before today, and the company has a strong presence in Germany. That's what I learned when I first met the CEO, which surprised me because not many American companies tend to have such a big presence in Germany when they don't even have, Germany is a bigger market than the UK, but when they don't even have a presence in the UK, which is an easier market to break into. Honestly, do you now think, oh, I'm surprised I haven't heard about you guys because you're doing something really interesting, or I'm not that surprised I haven't heard of you because you have been doing this for a while, but you are not that different from other companies I've already spoken to? Is it, wow, or
Sorry, I'm too tired to answer that complicated question.
We got the great
Was that ironic?
Be honest. We can handle it.
Because Peer is one of our clients, and I want to hear from your end guys, because you obviously understand the industry way more than I can. I want to understand from you. Do you think that Peer is different enough from the other companies you've spoken to, or much of a muchness, as we say?
So, to be honest, my impression is that this is way more complex than other solutions I've seen in the past.
Okay.
Which might be because it's lacking some graphical fancy stuff. so it's very, very clear on graphics, right?
Right.
This is my impression. I don't know the product in detail, so I might be totally wrong.
It's a 30-year-old experience in the solution. Yeah, of course you can always design it better and more fancy. What a lot of people do, for example, I used to work with rubric, if you know. It's a very complex backup solution, but with a new design it looks more easier, but it's still complex, of course.
Yeah.
And of course we need to develop that continuously. But as you can see, as you said, it's not just a simple file synchronization software.
Yeah.
It can do really a lot more.
Right.
I think that's the key, that the powerfulness of it and where it sits is very niche driven for particular customers. And so when people sit down at work in their data centers and they hit these problems, they'll, you know, where does everyone go? They'll go straight to Google, and hey presto, there will be Peer, right? One of the top ones that will be facilitating that type of, because we'll have a very good use case for the pain that they're suffering for the solution. But I'm totally,
Yeah, and as I already said, my world is more in the Unix and Linux market, and that's probably why I didn't.
In the Unix and Linux market, there's nothing with picture, you know. This is all
But anyway, I think this is a very useful solution for lots of people and customers.
Let's say like that. It doesn't happen. I'm not so long in the company. I've just joined 5 months, as I said. But so far, I'm working on the sales side, and when people are interested in our solution, there are not many. Everybody who sees us the first time. There's a 90% buying rate, I would say so far. So it's really, they know what they get, and then they get on top the benefits we have with the file logging, with the MED solution, and all these things, and then they like us.
Yeah, it's those challenges. It meets the challenges that they're facing.